Good evening, everybody. Hi. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming this evening to a conversation and book signing with Neil Gaiman. I'd like to welcome you to the University of the Arts, for those of you who are not from the University of the Arts, and would like to introduce the president of the University of the Arts, Sean Buffington, and Neil Gaiman.
Is that working? Can you hear us? Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear Neil? Testing.
Testing. Ah! Strange, scary things just happened.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here with us tonight. I
Just pretend I'm not doing anything.
while Neil is
The-
preparing to make good art, I'm not going to say. How many people here have ever heard of Neil Gaiman? Okay, all right. So I have a very long biography here, but I'm actually not going to tell you very much about Neil because I have a feeling actually most people in this room probably know more about Neil's career and the various twists and turns of it than I do. So what I thought I'd do is I would just jump right in. Some of you probably know that a year ago, almost to this very day, Neil appeared on the Academy of Music stage and delivered a speech that rapidly went viral and a year later became this book, Make Good Art. Do you have your Make Good Art? Yes, in your hands? All right, if you don't have it now, you better get one fast. So I'm gonna just kind of jump right in, Neil, with what may be the hardest question or the easiest question. I'm not sure which. What is great art?
Great art for me is anything that provokes a deep emotional reaction at the time that you hear it and then you can't get out of your head. And then you go back and you experience something completely different to the thing you experienced the first time. And whether it's a painting or a piece of music or a book, whatever, it's that thing where with a book, it's that moment where you put it down and you go, I'm not quite the same person that I was before I read that book. I'm not the same person that I was before I saw this painting. That, for me, is great art.
How do you know it when you're making it?
You don't.
Yeah.
You have no idea. And furthermore, you have no idea if you ever have. And furthermore, I'm not sure that there is any piece of art, good, bad, mediocre, great, or ridiculous, that has been made in the history of this planet that absolutely everybody would agree is great art. Somebody's beautiful painting is somebody else's paint, somebody else's daubing. Somebody's piece of transcendent music is somebody else's caterwauling. And that's wonderful. And that actually is the magic trick that allows artists of any kind to make a living, is the fact that not everybody likes the same thing. The fact that everybody, we have our likes and our dislikes is magical. That's fantastic.
So there's always room for more.
There's always room for more, especially if you are spending that more time as an artist being yourself. Mm-hmm. There tends not to be more at the point where you go in as an artist going, people like this thing over here, so I'm going to try and do that thing that people like, that they like from other people. That tends to be the place where you watch people getting ground down emotionally, getting their souls destroyed, and often getting them sort of looking around a few years later, unable to make a living because people wanted that small thing for that time, and really what they wanted was the thing from the people who were doing it because they cared. you see it a lot in publishing, where somebody will write a best-selling vampire novel or whatever, and
That's never happened.
And suddenly you cannot move for vampire novels.
Right.
And then there's lots of people standing there going, I don't understand why nobody bought my vampire novel. And you're going, well, A, it wasn't very good, and B, they had 100,000 to choose from, and B, they were sick of vampire novels by the time yours came out.
Right, right.
So
It's very percussive.
I am. I have an
Yeah.
incredibly percussive. I
Yeah.
boo. Who knew?
Your most fantastic mistake?
Oh, what a great question.
I had to have one.
I kind of hope that my greatest mistake has not yet been made. It would be really disappointing to go, oh, I've already made it. I really do enjoy mostly the process of getting out there and screwing up interestingly. And sometimes, mostly because you learn so much from ways that you screw up. I remember Neverwhere and the BBC, and just my complete walking away from having made a 6-part television series with the BBC, that I'm going, look, I know what the scripts were like. I know what this thing was meant to be. The thing you've made wasn't the thing in my head, and it doesn't even feel like it. And going away and going, right, and writing Neverwhere the novel,
Yeah.
and mostly writing it just as an effort to go, no, this is what I meant. It's meant to feel like this. It's meant to look like this. And the great thing about Neverwhere was it had a couple of effects, one of which was, or the biggest of which was I wrote the novel. And earlier this year, BBC Radio 4 did an adaptation of Neverwhere the novel on the radio, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, Sir Christopher Lee, James McAvoy, Bernard Cribbins, this absolutely wonderful cast. And just listening to it, going, this actually is the thing that I wanted on the BBC 15 years ago, only now I get it with the greatest cast in the world and an unlimited special effects budget, which was just perfect. But, you know, the truth is, you do things, especially as an artist, you have to be willing to jump into the unknown, and you have to be willing to screw up. You have to be willing to turn around and go, well, that didn't work like I thought it was going to work. And then, and as long as you go, well, why didn't it? What went wrong? What was it meant to be? How can I fix that? How can I do it more interestingly next time? What did I learn? As long as you get that to take away, that's great. If, on the other hand, you go out in the world and do exactly the same thing again, and then get slapped in the face by a large plank in exactly the same way again, that is not how you should be making mistakes. That's like, no, sorry, that's wrong, that's broken, don't do that.
Well, here's a great question from the audience. Which of your characters would you most want to be stuck in an elevator with, and which would you not?
Oh, I don't, I mean, which character would I not want to be stuck in an elevator with? Probably one of the ones that likes killing people when they get bored. I know I could be entertaining for the first 15 or 20 minutes, but, hour 2 or hour 3 of stuck in an elevator, they might just... I, for years, actually have had not being stuck in an elevator, but meeting at a party, my sort of test of characters in my head. I just remember once, years ago, as a young man, reading a novel, and it was a brilliant novel written by a very brilliant writer, and I somewhere in chapter 4 or chapter 5, and I thought, you know, the truth is, if I met any of these people at a party, I would make my excuses and head for the kitchen. They are not people I want to spend any time with. And I thought, you know, even if, when I create characters, I would like them all to be people that I would like to spend time with. Who would I like to be stuck in an elevator with? I think Merv Pumpkinhead from Sandman would be great if he'd not smoke. I don't want to be stuck in an elevator with somebody smoking a cigar. It's going to get really old really, really quick, especially because his cigar never burns down. Never been replaced in Sandman. It just sort of sits there at the same length smoking. I would love, I've just written my first Neverwhere story, partly just because I loved the BBC adaptation so much, and I just went, well, wouldn't it be fun to go back there? And so I did my first story in 15 years, and it's called How the Marquis Got His Coat Back. And I loved spending time with the Marquis de Carabas. He was just so gloriously unreliable. And he'd be a great person to be in an elevator with because he'd be entertaining. But there are very few of my characters that I wouldn't like to be stuck in the lift with. And even the baddies, because I hope there are at least people you'd like to talk to for a while before they eat your eyeballs.
Unarmed,
Yes.
yeah. Another member of the audience remarks about how outstanding your women characters are, and asks whether you consider yourself a feminist writer.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go. That's easy. All right. Okay. Well, I thought that was going to open up. It was
You
just
know, well, it has the danger. Anything that has a yes or no answer is you can actually play the yes or no card. And it got particularly frustrating for me when I first was writing comics, where I'd read comics written by men, drawn by men, and I'd be going, this is really, really weird. These people, as far as I can tell, exist on the same planet that I do, and yet they have obviously never met a female. And I don't know how this has happened. That's strange. They may
actually have been true in some cases.
I know there are monasteries in Greece. There are there's a peninsula on which women are not allowed. I started thinking maybe the people who did the comics came from there. And then I would start to try and figure out why it was that, women in comics, I started going, if I was a woman, I wouldn't go anywhere without a nice thick cardigan, because it's cold in whatever they've dressed me in, and a pair of scissors for when somebody ties me up. You need your scissors and your cardigan.
How do you approach a problem as vast as constructing an entirely new world within which characters from the ones like Coraline, Neverwhere, and Mirror Mask must exist?
Mostly you approach it by never going, I'm going to create a giant entirely new world. Mostly you approach it by having an idea for a person that you'd like to meet, maybe 2 or 3 people you'd like to meet, maybe a scene or so. With the Graveyard book, it just began with me looking at my 2-year-old, 18-month-old son riding around a graveyard on a little tricycle and going, he looks so comfortable here. He looks so happy. And then thinking, wouldn't it be fun to do a story about a little kid who gets brought up by dead people in a graveyard? And that then implies things. And then you start creating, going, well, okay, it's kind of, and then I remember thinking, well, that's kind of like the Jungle Book. Okay, so I'll call it the Graveyard Book, and I will play into the Jungle Book thing rather than try and avoid it. So you have your Bagheera character who would, I guess Bagheera should be a vampire, Baloo should be a werewolf of some kind. That feels right. And I'll fill it with, and the wolves will just be the people who are buried there, and I'll have all sorts of
So it grows
time.
organically.
So it grows organically, yeah. I mean, it is the process whereby you do take the seed of an idea and you water it, and you watch it sprout, and you watch it grow.
You may be unwilling to take a position on this next question. Who is your favorite doctor?
What a lovely question.
I don't think they mean like your podiatrist.
No, I know. Okay, my doctor, which is not necessarily the same as my favorite doctor.
Yeah.
My doctor was Patrick Troughton, who was the second one. The first one, William Hartnell, was a little bit too scary and weird for me. And anyway, I was like 3 or 4. But Patrick Troughton was the doctor when I was 6 or 7, and he was the doctor. Right. I knew technically in some kind of weird level this was actually being played by an actor named Patrick Troughton, but that was silly because this was the doctor. Right. And he was rescuing us. And, you know, if I was really good, maybe one day I'd run into him and I'd go off in the TARDIS. And that was my doctor. Having said that, I think all of the last 3 doctors have been amazing. I think Christopher Eccleston is underrated, just because he wasn't there for very long. But you go back and watch his performance. It's just a beautiful, nuanced thing. David Tennant, at his best, was the single most lovable doctor. It was like having this absolutely adorable puppy who would also somehow accidentally go, "Oh, did I just save the world?" And you're going, "That was, yes, you did actually." Oh. And well. And you know, so you get that going on. Matt Smith, I think, is an astoundingly underrated actor. My favorite comment on Twitter of the episode of mine that just went out was somebody saying, "I didn't think Matt Smith was acting to play the Doctor until I saw your episode where I realized he acts." And it was like, yeah, no, there are people out there who seem to think that they just put, they put, you know, the boots and the jacket on Matt Smith, he goes out and he just does this. It's like, no, he's an actor. He doesn't actually talk like that. In real life, he's about 15 years younger than the Doctor appears. And so you know, and then, of course, hypothetically, one always starts getting excited by what the next Doctor is going to be like. So you start imagining that. And for Americans, especially Americans coming in late to the entire Doctor Who phenomenon, they would start saying, "Oh, it's such a great series, but why don't they just find one Doctor and stick with them?" And you're going, "No, this is a feature, it is not a bug. It is the reason. The reason why this show is now 50 years old and can reinvent itself over and over, and why it works, and why you can fall in love with it, and then you can get grumpy with it while your kid brother or your children or whatever go, 'No, it's great,' is because it will always change, it will always reinvent." So my favorite Doctor is always the one yet to come.
What was your favorite book when you were growing up?
Probably different books at different periods of time. If I do a short list, it will be P.L. Travers' Mary Poppins, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. By the time I was 9, I discovered the first 2 volumes of Lord of the Rings in the school library. And very battered first editions, and I loved them. It was years before I found out how it ended. I just reread The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers over and over again. Very obscure book by a man called Noel Langley, who is mostly famous for being one of the 3 people who wrote the original screenplay for The Wizard of Oz. And he wrote a book called The Land of Green Ginger. And I loved that, especially in the 1966 edition, which had 12 and a half chapters, as opposed to the 1971 edition, where they'd fixed it and now only had 12 chapters. And in the 1971 edition, randomly capitalized nouns were now no longer, you could tell people had complained and they'd gone and fixed it. And it was nowhere near as much fun.
Well, I'm going to assert interviewer's prerogative, and I'll ask the last question, and then I think we may have a special treat.
We may.
So my last question is this. You gave us a wonderful speech last year, and there were a number of people in this audience who did not get to be there. And so they didn't get to hear you. They, of course, saw it on Vimeo, and they are going to read the book. And, but if you were to give this year's graduates one piece of advice that's just for them, that isn't in the book, that you didn't put in the book, what would it be?
I think if I were to give, I think I would go much further on something that I sort of say at the end in the book. There's a point at the end of the book where I say, and I quote, I say, we're in a transitional world right now. If you're in any kind of artistic field, because the nature of distribution is changing, the models by which creators got their work out into the world and got to keep a roof over their heads and buy sandwiches while they did that are all changing. I've talked to people at the top of the food chain, in publishing, in book selling, in all those areas, and nobody knows what the landscape will look like 2 years from now, let alone a decade away. The distribution channels that people have built over the last century or so are in flux for print, for visual artists, for musicians, for creative people of all kinds, which is on the one hand intimidating, and on the other immensely liberating. The rules, the assumptions, and now we're supposed to is of how you get your work seen, and what you do then are breaking down. The gatekeepers are leaving their gates. You can be as creative as you need to be to get your work seen. I say, nobody knows, the old rules are crumbling, nobody knows what the new rules are, so make up your own rules. And I would go further, I think, on that. I would steal a metaphor from Cory Doctorow, who I used recently, which is, do lots of things. Try lots of things. The comparison of dandelion seeds. Think dandelion seeds. Dandelions, mammals traditionally spend a lot of time building a new mammal like them. It's a lot of time and investment in food and investment in everything. Dandelions, they just have a head with lots of dandelion seeds on it, and then they let them go. And the idea is that some of them will survive, most of them won't survive, but that's okay, because a few dandelion seeds are going to go off, and they will make more dandelions. And I would counsel people to think like that now, starting off, in the world that we're in, this peculiar world where we don't know what the rules are. Everything's changing. So do lots and lots of little trial projects. Send your trial balloons out. Float your dandelion seeds. Absolutely be happy for 5 things that you do to fail if one succeeds and one succeeds well. Just try more. Don't be locked down. I think that would be my big piece of advice right now.
Try more. We're going to try something right now.
We are. We have a special guest, I believe, somewhere in this hall, who was going to make a piece of art for us. And it might possibly be Amanda Palmer. And her magical ukulele.
You stay here?
Oh,
Yeah, we'll stay here.
we have this one here, too.
I don't
Oh,
need
but
it.
you have to
You don't
do
need
it.
it?
She
You don't
doesn't.
need it? She doesn't need it. All right.
I have a question for Neil Gaiman. Can I ask it? Yes. If someone came up to you and said, that Duran Duran book changed my life, how would you feel? But would you possibly backpedal and say, well, you never know, like, where
No, the truth is I have had things that to me are completely unexciting and were not things that I thought of as important or interesting at all. And people have come up to me and said, that thing changed my life. There was this thing that you said in there, I found it at the right time. You know, the seed took root and it changed them. And in a way, because that happens a lot, or not a lot, but it happens enough, I take not less seriously, but I attach less importance to the moments where people come up to me and say, well, American Gods changed my life, or whatever. The one that I'm experiencing a lot from now, and heard last from the driver who picked me up from the station last night, and he's driving me along, he says, my daughter's big fan of yours. I have her book. You know, she asked me to bring, when she heard that I was your driver. His name was Vladimir. It was very nice. And he was Russian. And he started telling me that Coraline, you know, his daughter's 19, and that she read Coraline 10 years ago, and it was her thing that got her through her teens. And that's something that I started hearing, I think only about 18 months ago. I mean, relatively recently, I've had more and more women in their, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, that kind of age, just coming up and telling me stories about Coraline. Some of them absolutely heartbreaking. Some of them, stories about it getting them through abuse or getting them through terrible things, but how this book changed them and they carried it with them. And on the one hand, I get to be really happy for them. And on the other hand, I go, yeah, but Coraline really was something that I just wrote to entertain my daughters and to tell them to be brave. It wasn't, does that make any sense? Okay. So yes, if somebody tells me they like my Duran Duran book, I will be happy.
Did you like a song? We thought this was relatively on topic for Make Good Art, except mine is Make Bad Art. Did not play ukulele, he did smack and probably killed his girlfriend Nancy Spungen. If only Sid had had a ukulele, maybe he would have been happy, maybe he would not have suffered such a sad end, he maybe would have not done all that heroin, instead he maybe would have sat around just singing nice songs to his girlfriend. Play your favorite cover song, especially if the words are wrong. 'Cause even if your grades are bad, it doesn't mean you're failing. Do your homework with a fork and eat your Fruit Loops in the dark and bring your Etch-a-Sketch to work and play your ukulele. Ukulele small and fearful, ukulele brave and peaceful. You can play the ukulele badly, ukulele banish evil, ukulele save the people, ukulele gleaming golden from the top of every steeple. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks, then gave her father 41. It left a tragic puzzle. If only they had given her an instrument. Those Puritans have lost the plot completely. See what happens when about an hour to teach someone to play the ukulele, about the same to teach someone to build a standard pipe bomb. You do the math. So play your favorite cover song, especially if the words are wrong. Even if your grades are bad, it doesn't mean you're failing. Do your homework with a fork and eat your Fruit Loops in the dark and bring your flask of Jack to work and play your ukulele, ukulele, thing of wonder, ukulele, wand of thunder. You can play the ukulele too in London and down under. Play and sink and play Jacques Brel and Eminem and Neutral Milko. Tell the children, crush the hatred. Play your ukulele naked. If anybody tries to steal your ukulele, let them take it. Imagine the song usually works better when I lose my voice. It transmits the message that is actually trying to transmit. Imagine there's no music. Imagine there are no songs. Imagine that John Lennon wasn't shot in front of his apartment. Now imagine if John Lennon had composed Imagine for the ukulele. Maybe people would have truly got the message. I think my approach is simple-minded and naive. Like if you wanted to change the world, then why not quit and feed the hungry? But people for millennia have needed music to survive, and that is why I promised John that I will not feel guilty. So play your favorite Beatles song and make the subway fall in love. They're only $19.95. That isn't lots of money. Play it until the sun comes up and play until your fingers suffer. Play LCD sound system songs on your ukulele. Quit the bitching on your blog and stop pretending art is hard. Just limit yourself to 3 chords. Do not practice daily. Some stranger sadness with a piece of wood and plastic. Sorry, I need to drink water. You'll minimize some stranger sadness with a piece of wood and plastic.